how do you maintain a level of composability where I, as a user, it's not so easy that I feel like I had no creative input at all. I didn't have anything to tweak or change or edit, right? Like I can still make it my own.
Okay, so today I'm happy to welcome on the show Nick St. Pierre. Describe himself as a designer exploring AI. I think that does a disservice to his background, really interesting background. But nevertheless, that's where he is. That's how he describes his channel. You can find him as, I think, Nick Floats, at Nick Floats on YouTube and Twitter. 56,000 followers on Twitter, just under 4K on YouTube, which is just getting up and going. But I came across Nick doing my own kind of desk research, just trying to really follow the whole generative AI space, get my head around it, but more importantly, see how it's being applied. And that's where Nick comes in. He is being very kind of candid and open in his journey as a creative, exploring and using these technologies. So welcome on the show, Nick.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you having me here.
So you cancelled on us earlier because you had some big media company want to interview you, and you're in hot demand, which I think is testament to what you're doing, testament to the space, where it's red hot right now. And if you've got anybody that's making half sense and being like very open in that process, then you're kind of in demand. So thanks for making the time for coming on. So as I said, look, yes, you're a designer leveraging AI technologies. What I really liked about your intro video on YouTube was that you described the fact that generative AI was allowing you to transition from being a designer, albeit a very successful one, into finally being a creator in your own right. And for me, that was really interesting. It's kind of lowering that boundary. It's 10x, 100xing creative ability of people. But I do want to kind of get into your background a little bit, because I think it gives great context as to why you might be an early adopter. And selfishly, like one of the reasons why I've got you on the show is I think, clearly how generative AI can augment people, creators, enable their creativity through prompting. I think prompting is going to be the verb of 23. And I would say you're probably pretty close to being a master prompter, right? I mean, you might not say it, but you look at the output of your work and it's kind of phenomenal. But let's learn a little bit about you, your background, kind of pre-AI.
Yeah, my background the last 8 or so years, really since about like 2014, has been at this intersection of emerging technology and creative tools and art. So with virtual reality, I was really fascinated by the 3D tools that allowed you to author 3D in 3D spaces. So at the time it was Tilt Brush, it was Oculus Medium, it was Quill that Oculus Story Studio had actually built to create the short film Dear Angelica, which is still stunning and holds up today as one of the best virtual reality films, in my opinion. But I was just fascinated by this idea that authoring 3D in 3D space felt so natural, because knowing the industry and knowing how difficult it was to create anything 3D with the tools that existed before that, it was an entirely new, more natural way to approach it, which I really love. And then same with AR. So I started doing the same with AR related to animation. We were building a tool to do full body and face animation of 3D characters just from your iPhone. So you can essentially plop a character from the gallery. You get in like a little T-pose, locks in, you could dance around, you could talk. And then once you have your animation, you could just place it in the world and record like a TikTok style video of your character, of the scene that you just acted out. And that was a company that never really got off the ground. We tried, we didn't make it work. And then after that, I just started going back to product design. So doing designs, front end stuff, UX, UI for a VR company, was doing that, working on like a web platform, a mobile app. But then I went independent back pretty recently in October of last year, and just started taking on some clients of my own. But it was at the same time, AI was like really starting to pick up and things were starting to get really interesting. And Midjourney had released version 4, which just took things to an entirely different level in terms of photorealism and quality. So I allowed myself, I was like, you know what? I'm going to spend January. I had finished up a client project. I'm like, I'm just going to spend the month of January and do nothing but look into AI. And my intentions were to figure out how can I build the most efficient one-man creative agency by utilizing AI tooling. What are the systems? What are the new workflows that I need to identify to be really fast, really competitive, and really good? And through that journey, over that month, I just fell into the rabbit hole of Midjourney, man. Like I just ended up going so deep, trying out a million prompts, and was starting to get really surprised by the results that I was getting. So I decided to start sharing on Twitter. And I think my first tweet about Midjourney was like February 5th. Before that, I was working with NeRFs, so neural radiance fields. That's actually what like really sparked my interest and kind of blew my mind. The first AI tool, at least, that like I was like, damn, this is incredible. The level of fidelity that you're getting, the realism of the lighting, the fact that I just took a video walking around in a circle on my iPhone, and now I have like a memory that I could jump into forever and shoot any type of clip with full cinematic camera motions where I feel like I'm, Christopher Nolan in there just directing something in like a memory. But that plus Midjourney got me onto Twitter, and it's just been insane, man. It's been insane to see the level of enthusiasm and curiosity around image generation and creative tooling in particular. I am so happy that the information I'm sharing is useful to people, and I'm not going to slow down. There's literally infinite experiments that you can run with this stuff. So I'm just constantly testing it out and seeing where it takes me. Can't stay married to it for too long. New version, things change, but so far things are working. So hopefully they continue to work in the future.
I would highly recommend, for those that can have the luxury of being able to do it, like taking a month out to just play with these things. I'm seriously considering taking my daughter out of school because of everything that's going on with generative AI, whether it's Chat GPT. I kind of just look at her curriculum. I'm like, it's just all irrelevant. Like ultimately, you're going to need to be able to know how to prompt, to communicate with these tools, to interact with AI, and it's just going to be so transformative or disruptive to almost everything. The most exciting part, the most like visceral part, the most viral part, of course, is creative industries. And look, you mentioned a lot there. Definitely want to get into NeRFs. Don't really know so much about that. But I just want to kind of give a little bit more color on your background. Again, you're very humble. You talked about some things working, some things not. But I know you worked with Facebook, Oculus, Adobe to showcase VR and AR toolkits. I think that was Magic. I don't know if that was the founder that the company that you're referring to.
That was the AR company. So I actually came back from this tour with the organization called Kaleidoscope, where we produced, it was 10 film festivals in 9 countries over 6 weeks. And it was a small crew of like 3 of us. I was literally like, my carry-on to every flight was a Pelican case full of 50 Gear VR. It was the phones. I forget what they were. They were like some Galaxy phone, but it was like 60 cell phones that I had in a Pelican case that I was just traveling with from country to country, setting up these devices. But we were showcasing storytelling and creative tools, and the reception all over the world, just the looks on people's faces, just the amount of just surprise and awe that they had in whenever they took off this headset. It was just mind blowing to me. So after that, that's when I started Magic. I'm like, I just want to like showcase this stuff as art. Like, I don't want to be doing VR events. Let's just have an art gallery and showcase the work. So that's what we did with Oculus and with Adobe, and put together some cool stuff. But events aren't the most scalable business, let me tell you. So we started building some technology, and that didn't work out either. So you win some, you lose some. Maybe I didn't catch the AR wave, but I'm here riding the AI one now. So
yeah. Well, and look, that's it, right? We're in an exponential age, and of course, these things are converging, right? I mean, maybe just before we get into the AI stuff, it would be good to learn about NeRFs because you mentioned that this allowed for these memories. I love that concept for a number of reasons. So for me, the way that I look at AR is that you can layer memories on the world for yourself, but also for other people to experience. So obvious example, stadium. Think about all the events and moments that have been happened in any of these major music stadiums, sporting venues. From the perspective of 90,000 people, each one is an individual memory, layered over time and history. I'm really interested in that how that technology NeRFs allow for that. Could you just expand on that a little bit more?
I'm a non-technical guy. I'm a designer, not necessarily a technologist. So I can't give you the nitty gritty, but I will tell you this. What they're doing, the company I use, by the way, is Lumalabs.ai. They make it so easy, this very complex thing of generating a NeRF. They make it as easy as just recording a video. You don't even have to do it in the app. You can take video footage that you have already on your phone and upload it, and they can, depending on the footage, they can generate a NeRF.
What's a NeRF? Just quickly, how do we describe a NeRF?
It stands for neural radiance field. And what it does is it takes a bunch of 2D images and can analyze them and convert them into really realistic and highly detailed 3D scenes. So the way that it's doing that in Luma is through video capture. So I walk in a circle around my subject, and it's outside in. So like, it's best if you start around and you're orbiting your scene, which is different than like photogrammetry, which might be what people are more familiar with. But in this case, you're just orbiting your scene, getting different angles. So the camera stays level, and then it's like slightly facing down, and then down slightly facing up. And what it does is it's able to determine like how the light bounces off of the objects in your scene, like very realistically. So the end result is you have a 3D scan that looks like real life. The lighting is spectacular. The level of detail is incredible. And in that app, once you have that, they have this editor where you can go in and you can keyframe out camera movements, and you can control the roll, the pitch, the yaw, the distance from the subject, the X, Y, the Z, the focal length. You have full cinematic control. You can export at pretty much any aspect ratio you want, up to 4K, and even export depth maps. So that's going to be, especially with things like ControlNet and what's going on in like the Stable Diffusion ecosystem, but to transform a NeRF that you take with really accurate depth information and use it in other AI tools to apply a different style over it, or change an element through a prompt. Like all that's starting to happen.
Animate. Yes, you could probably animate it at some point.
You could probably animate. I don't know if Luma is heading in the direction of animating the assets. Right now they have in beta, they have a text to 3D. So just like you would prompt Midjourney for an image, you can prompt Luma and get a 3D asset. So that's going to be really interesting. But there's also like Wonder Dynamics is another tool that is getting a lot of hype right now. And what they're doing is building just what looks like, I haven't had a chance to use it, but from the people who have and what I've heard, an incredibly intuitive user interface for doing CGI and VFX, where it's literally, I could take video footage of me walking through the park and drag and drop like a 3D character asset over just like the image, the still of me in that frame. And it automatically lights, composites, and animates that character exactly as I was moving, which is just insane. And it's, when you look at the platform, it's not like you're looking at, even like Photoshop or Adobe Premiere, something that has all these bells and whistles. It looks as simple as like Figma or Canva, but what you're accomplishing is like pretty advanced VFX and CGI in browser. Like, that's just wild. And the fact that that's going to be available to just like a kid in school, at like a low monthly rate, or maybe there's like some, I don't know, student discount or something. What people are going to be able to create and bring to life in no time at all, like in minutes, is going to be insane. And it's happening really, really fast.
And I think that's a really exciting point. And again, like coming back to what I said at the top end, this was what I found really interesting by your YouTube intro video, which is similar to you, although I'd say even less technically proficient. I regard myself as a creative technologist. I'm not a coder. I can't really do anything especially technical. I have like a general understanding of technology, like generally understand, well, this could work with that. And I think the difference is you could probably execute on it, and I just invest in people that execute on it.
I remember when I started getting into this, I was looking into like stable diffusion, and I was like, oh, maybe I could just spin this up locally. I didn't have a machine that could do it. But then I was playing with some video animation stuff like Deforum, and I had to go into Google Colab, and I opened Google Colab and had like a mini hyperventilation thinking about trying to navigate that thing. But that's actually, I think, an important point. Like, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the position of like, if I can do it, and what I'm sharing with you is something that anybody can do. You don't need any level of technical proficiency to create things with anything that I've shared, at least. I'm trying to also focus on tools that are inherently mobile, because I think general access, right? Like, there's like ubiquity in mobile accessibility. You can go to very remote places that don't even have clean drinking water. They all have cell phones, right? So working in Midjourney, working with like Runway, working with NeRFs, these are all mobile friendly. You can do all of it from your phone. And that to me is wild. So people don't know that yet, though. Like the general public still is like, what's AI? And in Twitter, it's easy to get, lost in the conversation and really feel like the whole world is talking about it, but it's just not true. So I'm trying to at least come from the position of the everyman, the everywoman approach. Like, you can do this if you're a kid sitting at home, 12 years old. You can do this if you're a 40-year-old parent of 2 with a small business. Like, there are ways you can utilize this tech today with the knowledge you have to benefit you.
Yeah, and I really can't emphasize that enough, right? I mean, you said it really well. Like, most people who have like a little creative bone in their body, maybe in their part-time, they've got, I'm going to go and learn like Adobe or Photoshop, and you go in there and the tools just overwhelming, right? Or these music production tools they're just so overwhelming. There's so many options. You go in there and you leave pretty quickly, and that's it. And you maybe cancel your subscription. I can't stress enough like how almost all of these tools are so intuitive. You really can go in there. You can start playing. You can start seeing the output. And with things like Midjourney, it's in a Discord channel, so you can see what other people are doing, and you can just copy and paste. I like that. You can copy and paste. You just got to take the time out to play, and it's really not that intimidating. And I think the really cool thing is, and I want to kind of probe it a little bit more, but for us, we kind of call it composable creativity. The great thing is that it's not just one tool, right? You can do something in one tool. You can take the output, put it into another tool, take the output, put it into another tool. In like less than half an hour, you've got a full multimedia, scripted, animated avatar character scene. I mean, maybe let's start at some of the kind of the primitives, some of the basics that you're playing around with, that you're helping others play around with. And then I'd like to go all the way to how you're then composing these different technologies into a stack for like the most sophisticated output. But maybe we could talk through some of your work, some of the specifics, and then zoom out and look at that as a stack.
The work that I'm focusing on is image generation for the most part. So prompting, turning text into media. Midjourney has been where I'm focusing my efforts, although the prompts that I create and all the information and tutorials that I share, they all work across the suite of generative tools people have tried them in DALL-E and had good success. Adobe Firefly, Stable Diffusion, you name it. So the prompting is working, but prompting is moving much more towards like natural language and storytelling. So the thing that like I've really been focusing in on lately, especially with version 5, which is much, much better at interpreting natural language, is finding ways to introduce ideas in the most specific possible way I can. So language that is specific to the idea that I'm trying to get across, that can't necessarily be interpreted against like some other variable and potentially get confused.
So it's almost like it's creating the specificity of the brief. It's the creative brief in a way, right?
Yep.
That you're giving.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're sort of analyzing it as you would be like a critic of some sort. Like if you're looking at a beautiful painting and you're asking, oh, like, what do you like? What does this invoke? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? It's talking about it in a way that is accurate, specific to the type of image, and speaks to the general composition as well. So that's like key terminology about lighting and framing and the camera angle, right? Or the film type.
There's some technical stuff there, right? There is some like quite technical language terminology you would only know if you knew about photography or film production to a degree, right? But you can copy and paste that, but it is quite specific technical.
Yeah, depending on what you're looking for, the type of image you're trying to generate, I make a habit of really looking into the language specific to that item or that type of scene and use and reference language that is specific there. Even things like if I want a photo that's from the 60s, let's say, or has the aesthetic of the 60s, I could just put 1960s and it works, but I could also go find what are like some common film types that were used in the 60s and then reference a film from that era. By film, I mean like film stock, not like a movie, but like Ektachrome 100 or whatever. If that was popular during that era, I can reference that. And it's allowing for like more connections, right? Like at least that's how it feels like it's working. But if I try to create something from the 1960s, but shoot it and then put like shot on like a Nikon from today, like a high-end digital camera from today, it doesn't always work. Like sometimes you'll just see the camera in the image. It doesn't interpret it right because it doesn't necessarily match. So the main thing is natural language, like getting good at describing what is in front of you and painting a picture with words. And that I think is going to go for everything because I see LLMs as sort of the starting point for pretty much all prompting. Like I've ran experiments where I'm using ChatGPT and I'm prompting it, given a structure that I provided, but I'm prompting it to essentially generate prompts for me, right? And I could do that for architecture. I could do that for portraiture. I could do that for sneakers. I could do that for, landscapes. The language is going to change. The variables will change. So I need to identify what those are specific to that type of scene. But at the end of the day, the prompt that's generating all those is me writing something that makes sense to ChatGPT as a list of instructions so that it can generate what I'm looking for. So language models are going to be huge, especially like text to video is coming, right? Gen 2, Runway Gen 2, which is another part of the stack. They haven't released it publicly yet, and I actually haven't had a chance to play with it. But you can just turn your text straight into a video or an image straight into a video. So you might see this workflow where it's like I'm using ChatGPT to generate prompts for Midjourney that I use to generate really cool images that I put into Runway to animate those images into scenes. So I can go from like story to storyboard to movie in a very tight window. And that's incredible, right? But that's kind of like the stack that I'm seeing. It's large language models coupled with media generation, whether that's image generation in something like Midjourney, or video generation with a tool like Runway, or make a video that Facebook's working on, or Imagen that Google's working on, if they ever decide to like jump in and start playing AI with the rest of us. But the other piece is like bringing the real world elements into this, whether that's just capturing video on like your phone, or capturing something like a NeRF, a scene that you can go into and then direct with a cinematic quality camera, just on your phone, to create shots that are otherwise impossible without thousands of dollars worth of equipment, right? So yeah, I did a video where there was like me holding the toilet paper and like stepping up to my painting in my house and kind of interacting with it. And I made it like the trippy sci-fi thing. That was ChatGPT to generate a script, me just recording video on my phone, generating a reference image in Midjourney, applying that to my clips in Runway, and then stitching it together. And then I took it a step further, and instead of recording video footage, I actually just took a NeRF of a bunch of random stuff on my coffee table, and then applied a style to that to see if I could turn that into something sci-fi. And it worked, and it was much more cinematic looking because I had that really smooth, buttery camera motion and cool optical effects that I was able to do in the NeRF. So lots of new workflows popping up, and that's just like one, right? That's like one example. But there's so many tools out there right now with the voice and the audio and the music. Like the whole creative stack is being flipped upside down right in front of us.
And, I know what I love about your work is you're sharing these workflows, right? How people can combine things, how you might sequence them. I actually didn't know that prompts were to a degree quite universal. You could reuse them across different technologies. I think that's super cool because, of course, in programming generally, there's always this kind of, you have different programming languages, and it just creates artificial barriers to creativity. Maybe if we kind of come full loop, right? So, I mean, still, as I understand it, this is still quite digital technology. You're using digits, you're typing things in. When do we get to the point where it's voice prompts? You just say something into your phone verbally, it produces something, you prompt it again through conversation, through verbal conversation. When does it allow you to start creating worlds in XR beyond scenes to worlds?
Yeah, there's a couple companies. The names of them are escaping me right now. It's hard to keep up with all this stuff, but there's a few that are doing like text to 3D world. They're not that great yet, but someone like Luma who's doing text.
It's inevitable though, right? It's inevitable.
It's definitely going to happen without a doubt, and probably fairly soon, I'd imagine, to be honest with you. The text stuff, the voice stuff is kind of possible right now. If you think about it, I can just go on Discord on my phone right now, turn on like voice dictation and speak a prompt or speak an idea, and it'll generate something. And the majority of Midjourney prompts, like the overwhelming majority actually, are like under 7 words or something like that. Like people are using it very casually. What I'm doing, I guess, would be considered more on like the advanced prompting side. Like if you really wanted to control your image, that's the techniques that I'm sharing. But the majority of people are just like, oh yeah, I want to just see something kind of weird and wacky, right? And I think just speaking to your phone and voice dictation kind of gets that across. But where it's going to get interesting is people who build like the layer in between. So I can just record or say a very simple idea, and then it runs it through its own model that takes what I'm saying, the basic idea, and adds in all of those keywords and details that make it a more complete prompt, which I can then edit, and swap out variables. And there should be probably better UIs where instead of me having to type soft lighting or harsh lighting or side lighting, there's like options that I can click on that maybe have some little visuals showing me what those things are, and go through like the steps of composing my image in that way. That is sort of where I see things heading. in the near term. And like Midjourney itself they're working on tools like image to text. So there'll be a point where I can take any image on my phone, upload it to Midjourney, and like /describe, and it'll return the prompt it thinks will generate that image.
Oh, wow.
So that's going to unlock a lot too. People just revisiting their own content and seeing how AI would interpret it, right? Or reimagining these things and maybe mashing them up and blending them together and creating something new. That's all sort of in the works and happening now. One thing I will say on like things being so easy, there's pushback from a lot of creatives, right? Photographers, illustrators, videographers, designers. There's a lot of people who are, concerned, rightfully so, that AI is taking over their jobs, but also mad, right? People are upset and frustrated that they spent all this time learning and perfecting a craft, and now some average Joe or random guy can type a few words and get an output that is of the same quality, or sometimes, even better.
The majority of times it's going to be superior though, right? Because by virtue of the bell curve, most people are average at what they do, right?
Midjourney generates, in terms of like photorealism, it definitely seems of higher quality than like the random iPhone shot that I have on my cell phone. How do you satisfy those people who are concerned? How do you maintain a level of composability where I, as a user, it's not so easy that I feel like I had no creative input at all. I didn't have anything to tweak or change or edit, right? Like I can still make it my own. That's a problem that I think needs to be figured out. And whether that's, like you said, bringing it into new tools and like extending the stack, if that's how it works out, or it's just like a user experience where I'm making more selections and I have more autonomy over what's being generated. Because people like things to feel like their own, right? We want to apply our own styles. It's not fun otherwise. If it's too easy, it's boring. So being able to make it unique, keep it within your own creative style, these are things that I think are going to be really important, and I'm curious to see how these problems get solved.
Well, look, Nick, I mean, we're 40 minutes in. I could definitely go another hour with you. I want to be respectful of your time. And I think that's a really good question to end on, right? Because the thing is, this stuff is so exponential and the stack's so convergent that I don't know how you feel, but I'm overwhelmed, constantly overwhelmed. And I have 100 people in a company, and this is pretty much all that we do is try and track the stuff. And we're overwhelmed. And it's an impossible task to kind of keep up with it. But it is also inevitable. A lot of things that we're talking about that are going to happen, they're probably going to happen quicker than most people think, right?
The rate of change within the AI industry is just insane. Like things get exponentially better in very tight windows of time. And that, like the conversation we're having today, like in a year from now, I truly cannot imagine what is going to be possible by typing a few words into some sort of AI model in a year from now. It's going to be mind blowing. And it's going to transform a lot of industries. It already is. The people who are not embracing of it and the organizations who are not embracing of it will fall behind to those who do, because you can be prolific when you utilize these tools and you can move at a rate that is just so much faster than somebody who isn't. So you can get left behind really quickly if you're not exploring or at least adopting the technologies. But yeah, the thing that's most exciting is like I said, the kid who's just finding what they're interested in and wants to explore, like that's where I see this stuff really having the most impact. And then as the tools get better, of course, like I'm sure they'll enter their way into the blockbuster movies, a bunch of short films, and single studio or single person studios releasing like fun YouTube content and interesting stories that they just visualize based on their diary entries for the last 5 years, or therapeutic uses where people are able to like address and go through trauma, or relive trauma, but with control, using their own words. Like there's a lot of really powerful use cases for this stuff. We'll see how we use it. Hopefully it's not just people putting propaganda images and fake pictures of the Pope on Twitter.
I love the idea, single person studios is like, Mr. Beast, $1 billion person, $1 billion creator, but like with 100x output. And it's going to be interesting to see how whole creative industries adapt. Like personally, as a fan of documentaries and historical documentaries, which are limited to archive footage, the idea that we can reimagine the past is what personally gets me excited. But I also know
time travel, baby.
Yeah, right. But then I can also imagine, like at the end of the day, coming back to how you created something unique within the stack, you were still creating some unique content. There was some input that was yours, that was you, that was your perspective. And I think, whether that's with a recording device or not, like people as prompts is probably how we create things that are going to be unique, and that retain some kind of, creative uniqueness, right? Because in that way, we're all unique.
Totally. And I've actually seen that, like the video I explained with the toilet paper that I did. There was actually a guy on Twitter, he used the same reference image, but he shot his own clips and he told his own story. It had a similar style, of course, because he's using the same reference image, but it was his story, and completely different than what I did. But it was a perfect example of what you're talking about, right? Like he provided his own creative input in the form of video clips that he shot and then edited together. But he used, a remix of what I was doing to sort of build off of and collaborate with me, but like virtually without me knowing. like that's so cool. It's so cool to see these things get out there like that. So you're totally right, man. Like we all have our own individual perspective and idea to bring to the table. AI just makes it really easy to visualize that. So your own personal story is more valuable than anything now.
Yeah, I mean, if you take it to its logical conclusion, and maybe we'll close off on this, I actually think the viewer or the audience as prompt will allow for this kind of hyper personalization. So in a way, the creator is just seeding some parameters for the production of the content, but how it's viewed is kind of like the what's the thing in quantum physics where you kind of it's how reality is viewed, that kind of defines it. And I think that's probably where it's got to end up, right? Is that for every individual, the movie is entirely personalized to like their mood, their moment, their context at that particular moment.
Yeah, I mean, in an age where you can type something in and generate whatever you want, the thing that's most unique is you, right? And your story and your individual perspective. Authenticity will reign supreme in the age of AI. Individual personalities, I think, are incredibly valuable, and will be even more valuable. And being comfortable sharing publicly and showing your work and creating content, there's not going to really be an excuse for anybody to not be a content creator, in quotes, of some sort, because literally there's nothing stopping you. You don't have to do anything. You could literally, like you said, maybe I'm just talking to my phone, I'm asking Siri or somebody, or I'm typing a few words. To not do it is just going to be like laziness.
Right. It was amazing to talk to you. I would definitely like to do it over a beer at some point. But for now, we got like 50 minutes of what I'm sure is going to blow quite a few people's minds. So we'll leave it there. I'm going to be really interested to kind of get you back in a year's time, actually, maybe kind of reflect on everything that's happened.
Oh man, we'll see if I'm still here or the machine has consumed me.
You've got at least a good year in you. I can't guarantee it after that, but you've got at least 12 months. So just make the most.
I've got some time in me. I got a backlog of things to work on. Yeah.
All right, Nick. Look, thanks for coming on. Been a real pleasure. And as I said, people can follow your work on Twitter at NickFloats, same as YouTube. And as Nick said, you've got no excuse to like watch some of these tutorials, look at the workflow, and jump right in. Nick, thanks for coming on.
Start playing around. Thank you. Really appreciate it. I'll see you if not in a year before.